Hello guys, welcome back. So guys, this is the continuation session from the earlier session where we are going to implement the UI using React framework in Office UI Fabric. So guys, if you remember that in our previous implementation, we have used no framework, and to design the UI, we have used Bootstrap, and to use the Bootstrap, we have performed extra set of configuration inside the config.json file. Over here, we made an entry to the externals key, and within that we have specified path for jQuery as well as Bootstrap. Then we are able to use the Bootstrap inside our SPFX client-side web part application. So this is the story about the previous implementation. With React Design UI, we are going to use Office UI Fabric, and the benefit out of it, we don't need to perform any kind of extra steps because it is coming with the boilerplate code. So what I mean to say that, let's look into that. So guys, this is the solution of the React application, and over here, if you will come to the package.json file, then you will find that the Office UI Fabric React is coming along with the boilerplate code. So what it means? It means that we can directly go ahead and we will import the important library which is required within our application, that we can directly use it. No need to do any kind of extra setup to implement the UI. So guys, this is about the setup of Office UI Fabric inside the React based project. Now let's start our implementation to achieve this UI. So how we are going to achieve this UI? Let's look into that. We are having text boxes, drop downs, buttons, as well as detail list. So this control is the detail list control which exists inside the Office UI Fabric. So the first step, what we are going to do, we are going to import all the required classes from the Office UI Fabric module that we are going to use for our implementation. So let's jump into the Visual Studio Code and let's import those classes from the Office UI Fabric. So guys, to do that, we need to go inside the TSX file, and over here in this area we are going to import the required classes from Office UI Fabric. So what I will write import curly braces, and over here I will mention that from, and this is going to come from Office UI Fabric React. And what are the things we are going to use? The first thing we are going to use is the text field. So over here we will select text field. Next thing we are going to use is the drop down. Then the third thing, we are going to use the selection. So selection object is used whenever we are working with the detailed list, that is going to use. So we are going to use this one also. The fourth one, we are going to use the property of the drop down. So there is a property which is already being given within the Office UI Fabric, that is I drop down tiles. Over here make sure that you are using comma, then you will get the IntelliSense. If you will do control spacebar, then you will get this option, and over here you will see that it is coming from the library itself. Now you will select this. Then next we are having I drop down option that we will use to define the options for the drop down. So let me write that drop down options, and over here you will get drop down option. The next thing, if you closely look into our UI design, then you will find one thing, that is the icon. Here you are seeing that plus icon, this is the list icon, this is the save icon, this is the delete icon. All these are coming from icon props. So let's import that as well. To do that, I am going to write icon props, and over here we will select that. The next thing, if you will closely look into that, we are using the buttons, and these buttons are called primary buttons. So let me import that as well. To import the button, I need to tell that primary button, we need to select this class. Now the next thing, we need to import something called a stack. So a stack is basically another React functional component which is coming from the Office UI Fabric. That gives us the capability to align our controls. So what I mean to say that, let's look into that. So with the help of a stack, you can decide that how your control is going to be aligned. For example, after this select level of knowledge, you want your button should arrange like this, like horizontal arrangement you want within your screen. So that you can easily achieve through a stack component. And with the help of a stack component, that you can achieve without writing any kind of a CSS. So such kind of a capability a stack component provides. So we are going to use that component. So now let's proceed further. Over here we will import stack, and then we need the property of the stack. So for that I am going to tell that iStack props and select this one, and along with that we need iStack styles. So this is also going to be used with the stack. So we will write iStacks styles, and over here you will see that iStack styles. Now we are done with the stack part. Now next, if you look into our design, here we are showing many of the records, and that we are displaying in a list. So what actually this list is, in Office UI Fabric we are having a control, or say we are having a component which is called detail list, which display the information like this. So it is a component which we basically use to display the content in a list manner. So we are going to use it to achieve this functionality. So let's do it. So we will write over here details list into. Now next, I'm going to use a special class which is going to be used within the details list. So what actually it is? First I will show you what that feature is, then I will introduce the class. So over here you will see this details list, and when you hover on this list, then you will find that there is this radio button is coming on the hover of it. So how we will get this functionality? So with the help of, there is something called checkbox visibility class that we are going to use to achieve this functionality. So let's import that class as well. So that feature we will achieve through something called checkbox visibility, and that we will select it over here. Now next, I'm going to introduce another class that we are using on details list control. So what actually it is? First I will show you the behavior, then I will import that class. So over here, if I hover over here and when I click on this select, so at the time of click, it is selecting only one record at a time. So how we will achieve this? See here, whenever I am clicking on a single record, it is just selecting that one, not the multiple record. So this we can achieve through, there is a class called selection mode that we are going to import, and that will be used along with the details list control. So let's do it. So the class is selection mode. So here you will write selection mode. Selection mode gives us three options. One is single, another one is multiple record, and third one is none. Now next class which I am going to introduce is the details list layout mode. So basically this is also going to use with details list control, and that is used to manage the layout. So there are two options you are going to get. One is the justified, another one is the fixed. So I'm going to write over here details list layout mode. Make sure that you are using comma over here, then you will get the IntelliSense control space, then you are getting over here. So now we have imported all the controls which we are going to use in this implementation journey of user interface, and we will call it as step 1. So over here you can mention that this is our step 1 where we have imported all the required classes from Office UI Fabric. Now next, so now we have done with the step 1. So what is next? So next we are going to perform a step 2, but before going into the step 2, I wanted to give you some basic information, and that is about object-oriented programming. So in the world of programming, whatever we see into the existence in this digital world, that is nothing but an object, and each object has their own properties and their own behavior. So let's understand with an example. For example, we are using this Visual Studio Code. This is also an object. So now the question over here is, what is the behavior of this object is? That is defined through the different functions. For example, if you are hovering over the file menu, then you will see that the behavior is, it is highlighted. So that is the behavior, it is being defined for Visual Studio Code object. Now, if you are clicking on this file menu, then the behavior is, it is opening another set of objects. So all these are nothing but an arrangement of objects within an object. So what I mean to say that each object has its own behavior and its own properties. Now let's understand about the properties. So what actually the properties is? Properties is nothing but the attributes of an object. So what it means? Now let's understand the properties from the same example, which is going to be our Visual Studio Code example. And over here, the current setup of this particular theme is dark for Visual Studio Code. And that particular properties, I want to change it to the light. So what should I do? So what I will do, I will change the property of the Visual Studio Code. And how we will do that? So it is basically, we generally do through the preference and within that color theme. And over here we will specify the properties. Okay, I want light Visual Studio, so I will select this one. Now you will see that the color scheme of the Visual Studio Code is completely changed. So how it is happening? So this is happening through the properties behavior. Okay, this is the example of properties. So let me revert it back, and then we can proceed to the step 2. So I will come over here because I like the dark theme. So I will select the dark plus default dark. Now let's start our step 2 analogy. So guys, this is about object properties and objects behavior analogy, which I wanted to give you so that you can understand the next step, that is a step 2, where I will define some of the properties for our controls, which is nothing but an object. In case if you want to learn all the basics, you have to follow my course called Step by Step Mastering JavaScript, where I have given all information about the basics of programming. So now let's proceed further. So now in the step 2, I am going to introduce some of the properties for different controls. So first property I am going to introduce for our stack component, and the property is children gap. So over here I will specify children gap is 50. So what actually this property is? What is the significance of children gap? So I will tell you now. So whenever we use a stack component, then we have to specify the property of that particular stack component, how much gap you want in between these control. So that is what I have mentioned, that I want 50 pixel of gap in each of the children control which I am going to use inside my stack component. So that is what that property is doing. So now let's proceed further. Now next property which I am going to define for these buttons. So if you see over here, you are finding different icons for this particular button. So what I will do, I will define those properties, and then that property we will use inside our button control in the later session. But now I will define these icon information, or say these icon properties. So how we will do it? Let's look into that. So we need to define 4 variables, and each of the respective variable, it holds the icon name property. So let's do it. So over here I will come and define the variable for each of the icon. First I will tell const add icon, and it is going to be icon for create button. And over here, if you remember that we have imported this particular interface, that is icon props. So I will tell that my add icon is like icon props, and then I need to specify the property for my icon. So I am going to tell that, so this is a object and it has the property called icon name, and I want the icon should be add icon. So what is this add icon over here is, if I am mentioning add over here, then it will grab the Office UI Fabric icon and put it there. I will show you right now. If you search for Office UI Fabric icons, then you will find the first link. If you click over here, and if you will come here, and here if you will search for add into, then you will find that this is the plus icon, and you need to grab the friendly name. Once you grab the friendly name, and when you go to the Visual Studio Code and paste it there over here, then you will find that the name is add. So that's the reason I am mentioning add over here. So it will take it. So you must be wondering how this icon is coming without doing any kind of a setup. So to answer your question, that we have executed human generator script to generate the boilerplate code, and with the boilerplate code it gives us all the required configuration. Because of that, we are getting whatever functionality without doing any setup. So all these are coming from those configurations, and Office UI Fabric React is one of those configuration. Anyway, let's proceed further and copy 3 times. So over here I will copy this one. This is for your read operation. So I am going to tell that bulleted list over here. So I will tell bulleted list text, and the name I am going to tell that read icon. Now the next one is update icon. For update I am going to use save button, and then we are having delete icon. So over here I will tell that save icon, and this is going to be save. Next we are having delete icon. So I will change the name delete icon, and over here it is going to be the delete. So now we are done with the icon property specification for our button component that we will use later. But now we have defined it. I'm going to set up the style for our stack component. So what I need, const, this is another variable where I will tell that stack styles, and this is going to be the partial. So I will tell over here which is of type stack styles, and here I'm going to update the root properties, and root property is also an object and which has the width property, and over here I will tell that the width of this stack is 650 pixel. So I will mention it like that. Over here we are getting red line which is for error indication, that is because of a spelling mistake. So remove this I. Now we got partial. Now next I need to define the drop down styles. So far we have done for the stack style. Now next we need to specify the style for our drop down. If you remember, we have a drop down component as well. So for these drop downs we need to define a style. So let's do it. And what property we are going to manage with that particular style? That is width. So suppose if I want width of my drop down should be 300 pixel large, and that we need to specify it. So let's do it. So over here I will come and write const that is another constant variable, and I will tell that drop down styles, this is also partial class, so I will tell that partial and it is of type I drop down styles. If you remember that we have imported this class, and over here I need to specify the properties. So what properties I want to specify the value, so I will tell that drop down, and this is also an object type, and which property I want to update, that is width. So I will mention width over here, and the value which I want to provide is 300 pixels. So that's it. We are done with this configuration. Now let's proceed further. Now let's go back to application, and there I will show you one behavior. So over here you will see that whenever we are clicking on this drop down, we are getting these values. Same way, if we are clicking on level of knowledge, then we are getting another set of values. So how these values are coming? So this is also coming from the properties. So let's define those properties so that later point of time we can bind all these properties values with the drop down. So let's first create those properties values. So how we will define it? Let's look into that. So first I will tell this is a variable of type constant, and then I will tell DDL batch options. This holds the batches information, batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, and this is of type I drop down. If you remember that we have imported this interface from the Office UI Fabric React, and this is this one I drop down option, and this is of type array. I am going to tell that it is of type array, and what it holds all those values which is going to be the option of that particular drop down. So this is for the batch, so I am going to create an array, and it holds key and text. So over here I will mention key. The first value I am going to tell that batch 1, and the text which I wanted to specify for this particular key is batch 1 again. So I will tell that batch 1. Now I will copy it for another 3 times, and over here I will specify the value. So over here you will see that it is for batch 2. This is for batch 2. So we are done with the drop down option creation for our batch drop down. Now next we will repeat the same for our level of knowledge drop down, that is this one. So guys, we are done with this batch drop down. Now I will define the option set for level of knowledge drop down. So let's do it. So to save our time, I am going to copy this option and I will paste it, and over here, so let me grab it, copy this one and paste it over here, and this is going to be our level of knowledge. So I will tell that level of knowledge options, and this is also going to be drop down option, and over here in the value I am going to specify this is for beginner. Text I am going to specify the same value beginner. Another value I am going to specify intermediate. Then next for the text I am going to specify intermediate, and the last one is the expert. So level of knowledge holds these option sets, so we will tell that expert. So now we are done with the configuration of the drop down options properties. Now next we are having another property for the stack component itself, as we are using nested stack, and there is internal stack that holds the actual component like text field components, drop down components. So let me define that first, then I will show you in the upcoming steps where it is being used, so that you will understand the significance of this property. So how we will define it? Let's look into that. So I will again going to tell that it is of type constant, and here I will mention column props, and this is also partial type, and which is of type I stack props, and what properties value it has. Let's look into that. So over here we should mention equal to, first we will specify the value for tokens property. So what value it holds? It holds the children gap, and the children gap I want to put 15 pixel width. Once it is being done, then there is another property we have to mention, the styles property, and the styles property contains another property that is called root, and within the root there is another property called width, and where I need to specify it should be 300 pixel. So I will mention that width is 300. Here we are missing the comma, that's the reason we are getting error over here. Now it is being fixed. So now we are done with the definition of all the properties, and this is our step 2, where we have defined all the properties which is going to be used within the actual component which we are going to define in our next step. And what is our next step? Let's look into that. So our next step is to define all these controls, or say to define all these components. So first we will define text fields, then we have drop downs, and then we have buttons, and then at last we are having the detail list component. So let's create all these components. So to create the UI with the help of these components, we need to go inside the render function. You will see it over here within our React class, that is react.component, and over here which is our React component class name, and within that we are having a render function, and over here within the return section we should come over here and select all the line of code and press delete because we want to remove it. Now we will define our component to implement our user interface. So now let's start implementing our UI. So how we will start? We will start with the div. So here I will mention div, and within that our all user interface code will reside. So first we will start with the stack, and over here I will mention a stack. Select this, and here I will specify the horizontal. I want to put my controls in a horizontal manner, so that's the reason I am mentioning it. And over here I will tell the tokens. You remember that we have defined some token over here, some properties over here, and one type of property which we have created, that is called a stack token, and this is what I am going to use over here to specify the value for our stack tokens. So over here I mentioned that. Now next property which I am going to tell, that styles. So for styles I will mention style, and what it holds the property value which we have defined over here, that is stack styles. You should copy it, come over here, and we should mention it. So this way we have specified all the values for our stack component. Now let's close it. Should be styles. So this is our parent stack component, and within that I am going to create another stack which holds the actual controls like text fields, drop down, details list component. So all these component resides inside this particular stack component. So for this I am going to specify a stack, and the property which I am going to use, the property which we have created, that is column props. So all these property we are going to assign in this particular component. So over here I will mention that a spread operator, and I will tell column props. If you don't know about all these spread operators and different ES6 syntax, then you must have to go through my course, that is step by step mastering JavaScript, where I have given all the information which is related to the ES6 JavaScript programming. That is nothing but modern JavaScript. Anyway, let's proceed further. So once it is being done, I will close it, and within that now I start defining all my components for our controls. So first I'm going to define text field, and over here I will mention that the level which I want to specify, what it is username, email, select batch, select level of knowledge. So first thing is the username. So let's do it. So over here I will mention username. For the next value I am going to specify, let me close this one so that we will not get any error. Now the another property which I am going to specify for this particular text field is the placeholder. Placeholder is the basically the property which shows the message when it doesn't have any values. And the value which I wanted to specify is please enter username. So now this line of code will create the text field component, and I am done with the username. Next we have email. So here I will specify that is of email, and level I am going to specify email. Now next we are having the drop down for our batch. So over here I will mention drop down, and within that the placeholder I am going to specify as placeholder. I'm going to tell that select an option. Make sure that you should close it. Then if you remember, we have created options for our drop down, batch drop down. I'm going to use this one, and over here it is mandatory to provide the options properties. That's the reason this error is throwing, and over here it is telling that you are missing the options property. So let me define that, but prior to that make sure that we are going to specify the level information, and I am going to tell that level equal to select batch, and for options I am going to tell that options DDL batch options. And next we need to specify another property. If you remember that we have created properties for drop down styles, where we are specifying the size of our drop down. So how we will specify that? Let's look into that. Here we need to specify styles equal to, and then we will tell that drop down styles enter. So we are done with the creation of drop down for our batch. Now next we are having drop down or level of knowledge. I will copy this code and paste it again, and over here I will mention that select level of knowledge, and this time this is going to be DDL level of knowledge option, so that we will get different sets of options for our level of knowledge drop down list. So guys, now we are done with the control creation for username, email, select batch, select level of knowledge. Now next we are going to create this horizontal line, and after that we are having 4 buttons. So let's first create this horizontal line so that we can have the divider in place. So to do that, I need to come over here and I will mention HR enter. Now I will start creating the buttons, and where we are going to create, this is also going to be inside the stack component, which will give us the alignment to our button controls, or say alignment to our button component. So let's write the code. For this I am going to write stack, and it is going to be horizontal, and over here I will tell tokens, and I'm going to use the same token which we have created. If you remember, I will tell you again, and here we have created a stack token which holds the value for our children gap property. So over here I will come and mention the same. Now next we need to specify, we need to close this one, and within that we need to create the buttons, and all my button over here is of type primary button, and within that I am going to specify the values, and over here I will close this button, and within that I am going to specify the properties. So the first property is the text. So what level you want to print on button? So that is, first one is the create. If you look into this, you will find that the text is create, and that is what we are mentioning over there. Now next we need to specify, do you want to show any icon? So for that you need to specify the icon props, and over here we need to specify the variable name which we have created for our icon property, and it is add icon. So we will specify over here. Once this is being done, the next one is read button. So for that I will copy it. This is for read, and then we are having update, and then we are having delete. So over here I will change the text, read, date, and then we are having delete. So now we are done with the button creation. So let's look into what we have done so far. So guys, so far we have created the username text field, email text field, select batch drop down list, select level of knowledge drop down list, and then we have created the buttons. Now we are remaining with this particular div where we are displaying the message like record loaded and such kind of messages as per the operations, so that we can introduce. And at last we will introduce this detail list component. So let's proceed further and introduce a div which will hold the status messages. So over here I will come and write div, and I will specify an ID with this div, and the ID is going to be div status. This will hold the operational messages whenever we perform any kind of operations with the help of button, and what operations we have performed, those information this particular div will hold. So now let's proceed further, and now let's work with detail list. So guys, to work with detail list we have to define the columns, and to define the columns, what columns we want to show inside the detail list, we need to specify that. So what I mean to say that, if you closely look into this, then you will find that there are 5 columns. One is ID, title, email, batch, and level of knowledge. So all these columns are coming from the configuration, and that we need to define it. And to define the columns, we have to follow these steps. First, we need to create a folder called shared, and within that we will create a file called constants.ts that will hold the columns information, and that is going to be used within the details list component. So let's do it. I will select this one and make sure that I will create a folder called shared, and then within that I am going to create a file called constants.ts, and this will hold all the constants value which is being used within our application. This is one of the industry standard practice. Whenever we are working with any of the project, we must have to define a constant file where you can maintain all the static values in a single place, so that in any point of time if you want to change any of the value, you can directly go inside that particular file and change it, and that will reflect into your application. So that's the reason this constant file is very important for any of the project. Anyway, over here we are going to create the list columns which is going to be used inside our details list component. So let's do it. So we need to write export. Let's create a variable that is called list columns. Make sure that you are using the capital casing over here, as it is an industry standard practice. Whenever we are seeing any kind of a capital casing, that means that it is referencing the constant within the application, and within that we need to specify the array, and this array contains objects, and each object represents the column. So over here my first column, that is ID, and key for the ID is ID. We need to specify ID over here. Then second thing, we need to specify the name, what name I want to put over here. So I will tell ID. In the field name, what should be the field name? So this is also going to be the ID. So I will tell ID over here. Another property which I wanted to specify is the width property, and the minimum width I want to specify for this particular column is going to be 50. So I will tell 50 over here. Make sure that you are putting comma over here, else you will get this error message. Another property is the max width, and for the max width I am going to specify 100. Is this column is resizable? So what it means, I will tell you. Let me write it first. Is resizable true? I will specify yes, it is. Yes, it should be resizable. Now what it means? So it means that if you will come over here, then you will get the option to resize your columns. So that is what that property is, which is binded with the details list component. So now let's proceed further and define the remaining columns. Currently we have defined this ID column. Now next we will create title, email, batch and level of knowledge. So let's do it. So for this I am going to copy paste it another 4 times. So over here I will copy paste it another 4 times, and now I will change it. Another one which we are having is the title. So I will specify quickly over here title. Remaining is going to be the same. The next one is the email. This is also going to be the same email. Then over here, next we are having the batch column. Copy this one, paste it over here. And the last one is the level of knowledge. So we will tell that level of knowledge. Copy this one, paste it. That's it, done. So we are done with the column definition. Now we are going to use this column within our details list. So let's proceed further and let's create the details list component, and within that we will use it. So I will come over here and now we will create the details list, and over here I will put again, there is another horizontal line I will put, and after that I will put the details list. So I will tell details list, and now I will specify the values. Guys, it is throwing an error telling that items is missing. So details list is binded with the items, and from where this item is going to come, that I will tell you in the upcoming session. For a time being, I am going to write a code which you don't bother about right now, because I will explain in the upcoming session, because it is mandatory to provide that information, and to make it working properly I am going to define some of the static value for this. So I am going to tell items, and for the items I am going to specify over here array of object, and over here I will mention an array which holds ID, and ID I am going to tell that 0 over here. And then we are having title, dummy title, because this is not a dynamic value. Next we are having email. I will tell that dummy at abc.com. All these values are static values. When we implement the service part, then the data will come from the SharePoint. So currently it was reporting the error, and to get rid of those error I am introducing some of the dummy values for this particular items. So now it is being done over here. Next we are having batches. So for batch I will specify over here batch, and this is going to be batch 1. Now next we are having batch 1, and then we are having level of knowledge. Over here we should close this bracket, and over here we should mention the level of knowledge. We will tell level of knowledge, and here it is. Again I will take the same value. So we are done with the dummy value creation for items, and next we need to specify some of the properties which we have created. So for that I am going to tell columns. If you remember, we have created the columns, and that is of type list columns. If you remember, we have created the constant, so I will mention over here list underscore columns. It will throw error because we haven't imported it. So let me import that. I will go up, and over here I should mention import, and within that I will tell list underscore columns, and which is coming from the shared, and over here I will tell shared slash from the constants. So it is not recognizing the path because we did a mistake over here. Instead of web parts, we need to specify this particular folder inside this. Now over here we need to specify dot slash shared slash constants dot ts. It should be constants dot ts. Constants. That's it. So now you will see that it will not complain for the list columns name. Our next property which we have to specify over here is that set key equal to ID. So now the next property we have to introduce is the checkbox visibility, which I have mentioned earlier. This is the one you have to select, and we need to specify checkbox visibility dot on hover. So that means whenever we hover over the details list component, then we will see the checkbox. like this. If we are hovering over this checkbox, then only we are getting this option, else we are not getting. The last property which we have to mention over here is the layout mode, and that is of type. Remember that we have a specified details list layout mode, and we are going to tell that it is of type fixed column. I will select this dot fixed columns. So we are done with the details list component creation. So guys, we have completed the UI implementation. So before closing the session, let's see the output, how our UI look like. So make sure that you are going to save this one and go to the terminal, new terminal, and over here we need to specify over here gulp build into. So now it has started the build process. Now it has completed the build process. So now next we need to write gulp so minus minus no browser into. So this will start the server. So now it is starting the server. So now the server is started. So now let's open the hosted workbench and then we will test it. So guys, now I have opened the hosted workbench, and over here we will test our web part. So over here I will click on plus icon, select our web part over here, and then you will see it over here. We have successfully created the user interface for our event registration using React framework with Office UI Fabric. So this is first part of our implementation where we have created the user interface, and this is what I wanted to demonstrate you in this session. Now in the next session we are going to implement service part of the application, where we will implement all the functionalities like create, read, update, delete, all these functionality using PNP framework, that is practice and pattern framework. One thing you notice over here, we did a mistake, that is while doing the copy and pasting, we haven't changed the value for the icon. That's the reason each of the button is getting the same icon. So in our next session, I will fix this one also. So on this note, I am stopping over here. See you in the next session. Till then, bye bye. Take care.